Welcome to the Journey of Champions podcast about SportCirqls. I am Helgard and I have with me Matthew. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you for having me, Helgard.
At the Journey of Champions, we are going to talk to champions from various sports and learn from their journeys of what it takes to get to the pinnacle of sports. Today we have a guest who has made it to the pinnacle of sport. He has played rugby all over the world. He has represented the All Blacks from 1996 to 1999. He pulled on the All Black jersey 18 times and in 11 tests. He is All Black number 956. A good friend of mine, Andrew Blowers. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Helgard, and thank you, Matt. It's a real honour to be here today. So, looking forward to our time together.
Now, thank you for your time. And Andrew, before we start on with some of the questions and some, you're currently situated in Melbourne. Have you watched any of the tennis?
Yeah, well, obviously I haven't been able to get down to the tennis centre this year, but it's been, I've had a few late nights, a bit tired, but it's been pretty exciting. I mean, Melbourne comes to, alive when, these big events come to Melbourne, and we're, very lucky that we have so many of those, big major events. So, but really exciting to watch the final, obviously, tonight. So that'll be definitely what I'm going to be doing after this.
Now, Andrew, you and I met about 18 years ago in Auckland. You grew up in Auckland, and we met through rugby, but you grew up in Auckland. How did you find growing up in Auckland, and how did that influence you to become involved with rugby?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Auckland, family pretty much are all from, Auckland. My mum's from a big family she's the oldest of 10. Mum's immigrated from Samoa to Auckland for, education and opportunity. Dad's got Scottish background. So, look, growing up in Auckland was fantastic. Like I said, we had all our family and, you're able to, enjoy the social sides, 21st together and growing up with your cousins from a young age, it's very special. And I suppose that's the part where, rugby really birthed, with all the rallies, you're at an event and, you got a lot of cousins around. So you just, you get together and start running the ball. And, I always remember the time, I think I was probably about 12 and, we had our cousins who, 14, 16, 18. And the one rule they said was that if you join the game, you're going to have to tackle your 18-year-old cousins. And so that was one rule. So we all grew up knowing that rule. And I think that was probably, like I said, birthed that excitement and for me to start playing rugby.
Oh, that's awesome. But you're talking about your cousins and saying that if you play, you have to tackle anyone that comes across your path. Now, I grew up at a boarding school, and I was at boarding school since the age of 6. And every afternoon, we would, on the front lawn of the boarding school, of the hostel, we would play bull rush, and we called it open the gate. In South Africa, they called it open the gate. And you were a 6-year-old, and then you were playing with 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds, and you had to tackle anybody that comes across your path. Yeah, and you just had to tackle them. And that's how you got blooded into rugby.
Well, hey, South Africans love their rugby and obviously us Kiwis. But look, that's the great thing about rugby is you just get out there and have a go. And, that's probably where, you learn your basic skills. And definitely I learned to tackle, very quick. It's those moments where you look back and, you get very excited because that's the real learning of you.
Yeah, you learn quickly that you can't be afraid. You learn very quickly you can't be afraid. Andrew, just when did you, while growing up and you got exposure with your cousins and stuff like that, and I know your family was quite involved with rugby, but when did you first realize that you can actually make a living out of rugby and you've got the talent to go or maybe go all the way to presenting in All Blacks. When did you start to realize that that might be a possibility?
Yeah, it wasn't probably, I mean, obviously the journey was probably, started at club at a young age. And you never, I think back then there was no, you couldn't see that rugby would go professional. So you loved the game for itself, it wasn't until probably my later years in high school that I decided that, wow, there's, opportunities. I think I always enjoyed rugby, so it wasn't like a chore, going to a real traditional rugby school, Mount Albert Grammar. We all played any free time that we had a ball. And, but yeah, probably the first thing when you started to realize, okay, made my first New Zealand schoolboys team. For me, it didn't come, I probably was one of those kids that I really had to work hard. And so for me, probably after school, I started to realize that, I mean, at school, you didn't think that, the All Black jersey was there. I think you sort of focused on, enjoying playing footy. I think, and you enjoyed the traditional rivalries with, all the other schools. I still enjoyed my meat pies and, all the good food, because back then you didn't have to worry about the nutrition side of it. It was still very, amateur days. So, and then, when I left school, after that 95 World Cup in South Africa, that, you started to hear the rumours and that rugby could turn professional. And probably the timing was great for me, I think. I had, it was the day that I left school that I realised that, wow, I want to start training hard. And even though I didn't, see the All Black jersey in my sights, I knew that I had to, you can be good at school, but it's that day that I left school and my whole mindset shifted. I started eating healthy. I started training morning and night. Had some really amazing, I did athletics growing up, and I had an athletics coach, Russ Helgard, who turned up to the athletic track in Waitemata and was there for us. He didn't get paid. So he really had me on a really quite strict training regime. And, it started to really come to part. I had Don Oliver, the late Don Oliver. He did our gym program out west. He was obviously, a Commonwealth gold medalist. So he taught, the basics of power and strength. So I had a really good combination between, the cardio side and the strength and conditioning. So when I started to get a bit of confidence there, I think things started, that's probably, to be honest, the time where I started to think, okay, I can go for it.
Andrew, it's interesting you say that you had these coaches, but they weren't predominantly from a rugby perspective. They were from athletics, and I think if you think about athletics as such, because it's such a disciplined individual sport, coaches and athletes, although it was still amateur, they had to act like professionals. They had to get their bodies right, correct, or prepared, as if they were professional. So I think at that time, 1996, when rugby turned professional, when I talked to a lot of players from South Africa that played in that era, they didn't see themselves as professional. Although they got paid, they didn't see themselves because they didn't have the mentors you just had. And I think that's why you say you were quite fortunate to have those guys and to teach you how to do it correctly.
100%. And you hit it on the nail on the head there, Helgard. I think I had these amazing, Russ. I mean, if anyone knows Russ Helgard in the athletics world, I mean, we used to train at Mount Smart, the sand dunes, back in the day when no athletes, because, there's no social media. So we used to run through streams and, the sand hills out west. We did Saturday Mount Smart athletics. And so yeah, having those guys that wanted to give back because they loved what they did. Coming into, and you're exactly right, in '96, I felt like I had 2 years of professional coaching with, obviously Don Oliver, being a power lifter. And, he got us in the gym at 7 o'clock start. He had us in the sauna at 6:45 for 15 minutes, with all our obviously clothes on just to warm up. And then we started I reckon he was in his 60s. He would do, the warm up was free squats. So full, you had to squat right down up to your toes. And we probably warmed up with 150 free squats to 200. I was 20 or 19. He was 60 something. And he would get to, we're all like, man, when's he going to stop? This is our warm up. He wouldn't even be sweating. He'd be like 149. And we're like, we're out of breath. I had some amazing, like you said, I felt like before '96, I had some professional trainers, for me, and they would just gave their own time. There's a lot of us that trained, and like you said, we had golfers, we had netballers, we had soccer players, we had ladies in their 50s. That sort of, I think that whole mindset, the whole, athletic, stretching, you had to stretch for half an hour, and then after, a long hour session, we had to stretch for half an hour again. So I think some of those habits, moving into professional, I sort of had, a good year or two behind me. So yeah, the timing was perfect.
Andrew, and you were talking there about those previous coaches having big influences on your professional career, but looking back in your early days, who would you say was very influential in your rugby journey, more so in terms of not necessarily the performance side, but that helped you fall in love with the game and really love the game for what you saw before it was an opportunity to make money from it, a professional environment?
Yeah, totally. Like, I think you're put on this earth for a purpose, and I think you have strengths, and you have gifts that you've been given, and it's whether you run with them or you cruise with them. And I think for me, I think having many good mentors on my journey, I think that's probably been the most important thing for me, because as a teenager, there's a lot of distractions, there's a lot of, influences that can derail you and take you off that path. And, I had some amazing, family members, obviously mum and dad always were really encouraging me. A late uncle of mine, Lolima, he loves stories, and in the Pacific culture, we tell our history through stories, and he was a storyteller, like a tussi teller, they say. But having those people along your journey, Russ Helgard, and Don Oliver, Michael Jones obviously was a family friend, but someone that you could talk to that was in the in that professional scene, and just was always willing to encourage you. I can remember Michael coming over. I think I was 12 and he was 22, and we took a photo, and we look back at that now, and I remember the words that he always said, just never give up on your dream. So I think if I want to encourage any young athlete coming through, is that have those really great mentors around you, people that you trust is really important, because it's a hard navigate in your teenage years, because there are a lot of distractions. There are a lot of influences out there that, like I said, that can either derail you or set you on a different path. And it's important that you can tap into those people, when things get tough.
It's interesting you say that that you've had different mentors, Andrew, and I think if I look back, we just love rugby, and what made me fall in love with rugby, and I think it's sports in general, is with my dad. I knew, like, on a Saturday, we would go in the morning. I would play a bit of rugby for the school. We would come back, and around midday, we'd go back to the farm. My dad would cut up some biltong, and I knew when he started cutting up some biltong, we're going to the living room, and then from about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1:30, it was curry cup time. So equal to the NPC. So it was curry cup time. So from about 1:30 till about 6, we just sat and watched rugby. But during that, as I grew older, we started talking a little bit more, and it wasn't just about rugby. It's about, like, during the teenage years, it's more about what bothered me at school sometimes, and it became and it made me fall in love with the sport more, just because of the memories I made with my family, with my dad, for example. And then, of course, the early mornings, the tests against the All Blacks, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning with my dad, he waking me up on the farm. It is like -6 degrees, and just awesome memories. And I think that's, for sports in general, I think what young athletes need to remember is they need to love the sport. It's not just for the money. It's not just for, they need to love the sport and make memories through the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I love those stories you just mentioned about, early mornings and afternoons watching Curry Cup, or getting up in those early mornings. And it reminds me of my grandmother. She's Scottish. So, I had bushy, curly hair, and we would walk down K Road together, and, everyone would look at me because she had red, she's Scottish, so she had red curly hair, and they'd go, "Is that your grandmother?" But she was the one that, we would get up at, 2 in the morning to watch the All Blacks play the Lions. And, we didn't have a TV, but we'd tune into the radio and listen, and, we'd have, a bacon sandwich and a cup of tea together. And I still remember the day that, she, after the game, she said, "Oh, son, you're going to be an All Black one day." And I was at the age of 5, and, I think, you never forget those stories, and, that when people talk that you care for, that when times get tough, or, you get injuries and you're trying to, I knew throughout my journey, I would always remember what Grandma said was, "You're going to be an All Black, son." So I think that's so important that we have those people that talk into our lives, because, I believed everything that my grandma said, and, that sticks with you, it still sticks with me today. And that story, I had the opportunity, obviously 15 years later, to put on the All Black jersey, but, those are the memories and the stories that you look back to, the people that you care and love for, that influence you and talk into your life.
Yeah, it's Andrew, you've spoken about all the people that's influenced you, and you just said about your grandma saying that you're going to be an All Black. Was there any point in your life that you thought you might pursue a different path than rugby or sport? And if so, what was your interest leading towards? If you didn't pursue rugby, was there any other things that you were interested in?
Yeah, growing up, I always, I loved the outdoors. I loved, sort of hands-on stuff. For me, I think I always wanted to be a pilot, and I loved the police. I always wanted to be a policeman, just something in that uniform. So those sort of were the interest, as a young kid, wanting, you go to school and the teacher asks, "What do you want to be?" "I want to be a pilot," or "I want to be a policeman." So those were sort of the two areas that I sort of, growing up wanting to pursue. And I think somewhere on that journey, and that's probably something that I really, I had a lot of mentors in my sporting world, but it was probably the education side that I probably lacked someone that I could talk to about, hey, look, I want to pursue this. And maybe at the time for me, this is just me talking, I think education I struggled at school, not in terms of, it was probably more my application. And I think it's so important because the day I left school, I went back to uni and I started to do everything after school, which was fine. But I think, for me, I think if I had a bit more of a balance, I think. I mean, I just want to encourage, I work in, obviously here been working in the Melbourne Storm on player development. And we talk about balance in terms of, when you've got your day off to have, you either study or you work. And I think if I had a bit more encouragement on that side, I think I might have pursued those careers outside of footy. I mean, obviously, I went the sport world and made the All Blacks, but yeah, I don't regret, but I think, having that balance and for all athletes that I work with now, because, you start using a different part of your brain, you find interest in, whether you want to be a builder or a plumber or electrician, you know, you actually take away not thinking about, oh, did I drop that ball last week? Or, I missed that tackle. So for us, we really encourage the athletes that we work with here to, what else are you passionate about? Yes, we love footy. We love, you love what you do. But, that's not just you. There's so much more to you than just being an athlete. So, yeah, that's something for me. Going back to the question, I suppose, is that, yeah, I did. I really wanted to be a pilot and to work for the police.
And I'm going to give you a bit of a compliment here. I can see you as a police officer because you've always had a sense of helping others and uplifting others, and your sense of right and wrong, Andrew, has always been an example for me since I've met you. So I can see you as a policeman and helping other people. And coming back to your career a little bit, you first made your professional debut for Auckland in 1995. What do you remember of that, of your first game for Auckland? What do you remember and what stood out for you?
Yeah, I think, growing up, like you said, in New Zealand, going to Eden Park to watch the games, 90, I think it was 93, 94. I can't remember they stopped the day that you used to run onto the field and, used to be able to touch your heroes, which was great. Growing up, that was, as soon as the final whistle would go, the poor players got, just mobbed by, all us fans. And so there was a transition almost that I was sitting in the stands only a year or two before that, getting these guys, Zinzan Brock, Michael Jones, Sean Fitzpatrick's autographs and, touching them. And then all of a sudden, having the opportunity to put on the Auckland jersey. So that was very special. I think I can't remember. I remember one of the first games I played was in King Country for Auckland. And so that was the 95 when the World Cup team had, flown over to South Africa and the NPC had started and they obviously were down on troops. So I got that opportunity to step in. But for me, I remember that game because a cousin of mine and an uncle of mine, we were playing for King Country. Probably the only Samoan family in Taramanui, which is just not far from the mountain, Mount Ruapehu there. And so Andrew Lea Tuafi, he was the winger for Country and his dad was the prop. And so that was very special, playing against, some family. especially my uncle, because I think he would have been 40 something, propping, so for King Country. So yeah, that was probably one of the fondest memories. And just living that sort of childhood dream, and putting the blue and white stripes on.
I don't think players who's playing at Super Rugby or provincial rugby, how important it is for them to engage with the youngsters after games. I know they've got responsibilities and some of them come out. I'm going to take my son, for example. To this day, he's a die-hard Highlanders fan. And the only reason for that is the All Blacks had a warm-up game against Auckland in Pukekohe at the Steelers Stadium. And my son was standing on the rails and he was screaming at Ben Smith. At that time, Ben Smith was playing fullback for the All Blacks. And he was shouting at Ben Smith, Ben Smith, Ben Smith. And then Ben Smith came over, picked him over the rails, and then kicked the ball for about 10 minutes with him. And because of that, he's a die-hard Highlanders fan. You cannot, every year tells me this is going to be the year. So he's been a die-hard Highlanders fan just because of 10 minutes that Ben Smith spent with him kicking the ball around. And then I can say the same with the Springboks. It's quite a, because I knew quite a lot of the Springboks when he was growing up, they spent a lot of time with him and they gave him a lot of attention. So that's why he became a Springbok supporter, because of the time and effort that they've put into him when he was young.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important. Because you remember the time that, or you remember the time that someone didn't.
Yes, you remember the time that somebody didn't.
Yeah, and I still remember, Jonah, obviously, our amazing Jonah Lommel, when, he was sought after, and, he would never, he had such a massive impact on the global game itself, but he would never, ever, leave anyone out there and not sign. He would, we were always going, come on, Jonah, we've got to go, get on the bus. But, what an amazing guy to spend after training an hour. He could be there for an hour plus signing, and the impact that had on, so many young kids out there. So,
Andrew, you mentioned earlier as well that you've already spoken about your mentors that you had through your journey. Now, you made your provincial debut in 1995, but you also then later made your debut at Super Rugby level, and you played with some amazing players, and you were at that time, it was the dream team of the Blues at that time. It was a pretty strong team. And what do you remember of that team specifically about Super Rugby? Because Super Rugby was at its infancy stages. It was only running for about 3 years maybe. It was Super 10, then it became, it was Super 8 first, and then became Super 10. So what do you remember of that time, and it's that team especially, because you guys had great success in that team, and what made that team so great?
Well, I think Graham Henry obviously was a mastermind in, his coaching, his, management of players. He was sort of, giving us videos to watch, back in those days, you never watched, we were like, why are we watching a video of the opposition this week? And so, obviously on a coaching side, Graham was amazing. But like you said, there was just some players, that were just not only mentally tough, their leadership, at times in the meetings, that was the great thing about Graham Henry. He knew that he had this amazing leadership team. He had Zinni was the captain that year, and then you had, Sean Fitzpatrick, who was the captain of the All Blacks. And then you had, legends of the game, Michael Jones, Robin Brooke, Craig Dow, Olo Brown. So I think, I remember coming in there and knowing that I was one of the young bucks, and I still remember my first training in the Blues jersey, very first training. It was at Mount Albert Grammar. Eden Park were under renovation, and the cricket was still on, I think. And we had it at Mount Albert Grammar on the low field, and we were doing a defence drill. And I remember Sean Fitzpatrick, who was the last tackle of the day. I didn't know if it was the last tackle, but I can still remember him going, "Okay, what's this young buck got?" And so I was holding the bag, and he came pretty high, and he slipped up the bag. I don't know if he slipped or he just came across quite high and knocked me right in the face. And I fell to the ground, and I remember him looking at me going, "Okay, what are you made of?" So I got back up, and the whistle went. And I remember I said, "Doc, can you just check my mouth guard? Have I got my teeth went all numb?" But from that day, that was a sign of, okay. And I love the challenge. I was always up for the challenge. And but, I think Fitzy was going, "Okay, let's see what you're made of." And so from that day, it was great for me. I was like, I really respected those amazing, players, Fitzy and that. But every training was like a team run, like you were playing on the weekend, and just that mental toughness, the competition. Zinni had to win everything, every warm-up game, everybody, you had that competitiveness of, the Iceman, and the list goes on. But, Graham gave them at times the license to, okay, what drill we're going to come up against this opposition. You guys come up with it. I remember our team meetings, Graham would go, "Well, you guys are playing out there. Let's, what do you think?" And, the likes of Zinni would change drills and, would trial them at training, and then, would come out on the weekend. But just that competitiveness, the mental toughness of these guys, and we worked hard. Like we really, that preseason with Jim Blair, it was tough. Like we came, prepared in that Super 12 because it was unknown, obviously, with the South African teams and the Aussie teams. New sort of competition, but we were ready. We were physically, we were mentally. But for me, that was that team in a nutshell. You had Jonah on the wing, you had a Ronnie, Officer Tunul, Lee Stensness, Johnny Nummel, and just players that were competing for their positions. And we had a really amazing flow. We went into the season. We had a couple of losses throughout the year. We went to South Africa, and that's where it really changed for us. We beat Natal in the last minute in Natal, and that sort of headed us in the right direction coming into the semis, and then playing Natal again in the grand final. But yeah, just an amazing group of guys.
Andrew, I just wanted to ask, you were talking about the change you felt on tour. Is rugby, a lot of the time people have the understanding that when you have your home games, that's when you're expected to perform. But sometimes you'll see when a side is on tour, whether that's in South Africa or Australia, and the challenges that come with that. But there's also a huge positive you can sometimes see in squads when they're removed from all the media at home and all the pressure that comes with that, and they just have time to spend with each other and build those relationships. The team can really start clicking with momentum. Did you find that you enjoyed that aspect of touring, and you could definitely see that in the Blues team?
Yeah, 100%. Like, you always enjoyed being with the guys, and I said, that preseason really gelled us. We got to know each other well. We trained hard for each other. And when we're on tour, I think that was always the key, is having that balance of enjoying each other's company, and it's like going into mini camps, where you can do a lot more, but also important to enjoy the country that you're in. Like, when we're in South Africa, it was always a great opportunity to have a look at some of the safaris, or just do things that you'd do at home in your own time. And I think that was always the key, that because touring can be mundane too. If you just sit around the hotel, where the guys got out, the boys that love surfing, or those crazy guys that go down in the cage to see the sharks. But I think that was important, that we always enjoyed our time, our free time, whether that was Michael and Ronnie having their guitar by the pool, just strumming, or you know, um, doing the things that you enjoyed. There's a lot of the boys that had faith in the group, so we would have time doing that, or whatever the guys' interests were. We would really enjoy each other's company, and I think that can make a real difference when you're touring, because you want to be with each other. You want to do things that you may not have done before, but when it comes to training, we're all in, and yeah, it can be a real time of getting to know the boys that you may not have spent much time with as well, and that's whether get roomed with someone else that you hadn't spent much time with. There's opportunities for that as well.
And then just to jump ahead, when you made your All Blacks debut in 1996, what was that moment like for you? And where did can you describe the moment you received the news that you were going to be an All Black?
Yeah, going back a while, but I think going back to when Grandma said, "Oh, look, you're going to be an All Black one day, son." I think for me, that what mattered a lot for me was those people that had that influence in my life, that supported me, encouraged me. The trainers that had given so many hours, on their own back. They'd turn up to the sand dunes on a Sunday morning, at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Who wants to do that? But they were there for you, and so for me, it's always been a reflection on, your parents who have dropped you to endless amounts of trainings, or the coaches that, we didn't have a car, in our younger days, they would turn up to one house, and the coach would go, "Oh," my family would go, "Oh no, he's over at this house," or, and eventually he'll get me and take me to the game. So for me, that was probably when you put on the jersey. I mean, obviously you represent your country and your teammates. That's always a given, that you're not just wearing it for yourself. You wear it for the guys who wore it before me, but to have it presented to me in South Africa, was probably the pinnacle of rugby, was playing against the South Africans, and that was my sort of dream sort of year, '96, because we'd won the Super Rugby. We won the under-21s junior All Blacks, and then got a trial with the All Blacks and getting selected. But to get the opportunity to come on, it was Newlands, with a dream. Michael Jones, who is like a big brother to me, and to wear the jersey with him in South Africa, and we won that day, which was a bonus. But yeah, so that, for me, in a nutshell, it's just that whole, everyone that has had a part to do with me putting that jersey on. And obviously, faith is a big part of that too, and always giving glory to God because that's part of you know for me the purpose and the reason why you do what you do.
Mm.
And what was it like, obviously debuting in South Africa on that tour, haven't won a series there before, as a youngster that's chucking you in the deepest end possible? How did you battle that, or did you use it as a motivating factor, that your excitement to represent your country and seeing the bigger picture, that you, rather than fearing the opportunity, you're excited for it? How was that as a debutant?
Yeah, and that was like that was something that you always dreamed about, playing in South Africa, playing for the All Blacks, in front of just crazy supporters, and coming away with a series win. I suppose I didn't really notice the impact until we got back to New Zealand,
Mm.
and just the media, but also just the fans that came out. We did a celebration down Queen Street, and just I think that probably for me was like, wow, okay, this is what it means to New Zealand, to win a series in South Africa. And so yeah, for me it was sort of that, and I never forget after the when we knew we'd won the series, and just Sean Fitzpatrick, I'd come on as off the bench to come in for that game, and so I had a bit more energy than the boys, but just seeing guys like Fitzy just giving everything, Zinni and Michael and just those guys, they could barely get up, and I think I was trying to jump around and get excited, but I ended up trying to pick up the guys because it was just not only playing at altitude, but also just the enormous pressure of trying to win in South Africa, not just you're playing against 60, 70,000 South Africans, and the emotion, the build up to the whole series, pretty massive.
Andrew, it's interesting you say that. When that tour happened, I was in high school, and and I knew about the history of the All Blacks and the Springboks. But because of political reasons, we missed out quite a lot. In my teenage years, we missed out on a lot. So, 1992, the All Blacks came back to South Africa, and then 1995, and then 1996 happened, and I think I didn't realize how big it was until that final moment. The whistle was about to go, and we had a line out. South Africa had a line out about 5 meters from the All Blacks try line, and all you guys defended it with all your might and stopped us. I think stopped the Springboks with about three meters to go. But a vivid image that stuck in my head is Sean Fitzpatrick lying on the ground and just hitting the ground, and then on the opposite side, Mark Andrews getting up, just throwing people's legs away from him, and then his utter disappointment, and then right next to him the utter elation. And that's when I thought to myself, this is big. Guys, they've gone at it tooth and nail, and that's why I saw, like, Sean Fitzpatrick banging the ground just showed me that the hunger that you guys had to win it. The hunger, because a lot of these legends of the game was probably at the back end of their careers. And so just the pure hunger, and that sticks out in my mind when Sean Fitzpatrick was banging the ground of elation. I could see how tired he was, but that's the first time as a teenager I realized how important this actually was and how tough it was.
And I think that toughness to win in South Africa, obviously had gone to South Africa early in the year with Super Rugby and in '95, but and obviously coming off a World Cup win for the Box, I think the nation was at a real high. Just you could just feel it. The buzz was still there from '95, which was amazing, but also they wanted to win too. They weren't
Yeah.
they weren't coming to come second. And being at home.
Looking back at your career, um, sports at a professional level comes with pressure, and it comes with obstacles. What was one of your biggest obstacles that you've had to face, and how did you deal with it? Because, like I said, at any sport, doesn't matter if it's rugby, cricket, basketball, they come with obstacles or some adversity. And
Mm.
what was your biggest obstacle you had to overcome, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, for me, that's a great question, Helgard. I think, you have many highs and many, challenging times. I think coming in 96, that dream run came an amazing, year and really loved it. Had a few little niggly injuries. Um, and so for me, it was, I was still young. And I think I had come back from a groin injury and then went back into the gym and I fractured my L5 pars on my spine and then tried to come back early and fractured the other vertebrae. And so I had sort of back-to-back injuries after a really good run in 96. And I think that's where I would have loved to have spent time with someone in the, like a Gilbert Anoka, for
Mm,
example, or,
yeah.
Wayne Smith, who uh, really journey you through and are great at, the mental, the mindset. Unfortunately, I didn't sort of spend a lot of time with those guys until I was about 27. So I'm sort of fast forwarding coming back. But going back to the injury, 20, and just probably not being able to deal with that as best as I could. You always reflect and look back and go, yeah, knowing what I know at 27, I wish I had just a little bit of because yeah, injuries, you want to play, no matter what age, but at 20, 21. But in saying that, I got to work with some really good Pilates specialists. This is going back 30 years. Pilates the
Yeah.
rave now, but 30 years ago it was with the New Zealand Ballet. So it wasn't popular. It was like,
I can see you doing ballet, Andrew. I can see you doing ballet.
well, yeah, I mean, the ballet ladies on a reformer were fine, but seeing a rugby player 120 kilos on one wasn't very impressive. But it really taught me to, really strengthen the inner muscles and, how to move your body well. Because we're so used to, lifting weights, doing deadlifts and all this sort of stuff. But it's those little muscles that really set the core and set you up to lift good weights. So, I started to, work on that part, and in the end, it was a blessing because I started to think about it's not about looking good or having a good chest or guns. It was actually what are the muscles or that we need to work on to stabilize us better, to run better, to move better. And so, even though it was a really challenging time, there's always there's always light that comes out of it. You don't know why you're in it, but that really set me up again to be really mindful of stretching your core, stabilizing, um, preparing yourself better. Um, and so rehab probably wasn't a big thing I thought about then, but rehab become part of what I did. And so you know, to answer that question, that was probably a really challenging time in my career early on, but really, looking back, it was a really time where I was able to sort of reset and go again. So, but like I said, having, you know, working with some, guys like Wayne Smith and Gilbert later in my career, was fantastic. And I think, that's why I work with a lot of athletes now, professional athletes, and I rarely get them young because the mental side of it, people think that it's physical. Yes, you have to condition your body, but it's this part, those top inches that you really got to work on because it's a big muscle. I work with a lot of athletes on their mindset. Just getting them prepared to understand that if they go through certain things, how can we deal with that better? And so knowing that from my experience as a young athlete, wishing that I had a bit of, there's a bit of some tools, in that the mental mindset area.
I think what people forget, we throw these young people, they're 19, 20 sometimes, and a lot of them have great mental toughness. We throw them in this pressure cooker and in front of the public to perform, and we forget that they are still very young. You mentioned 27. 27 is actually still very young. In normal, if you're in normal life, 27 is still actually very young. But in a professional sports environment, 27 is old, and you're getting up there. And I think as a member of the public, you sometimes forget that yes, these are gifted athletes and people are performing at high levels, but they are still very young. And I think in the last couple of years, sports all around the world, and rugby especially, has come a long way to looking after people mentally and helping them recover through injuries and rehabilitation, and then getting them back into the game as well. So it is really, really important.
100%. The well-being, that was the space that I worked in at the Melbourne Storm. It was really funny looking at the pendulum of, we had a pyramid of success, if you know what I mean, at the top, the top, and then the middle, then the bottom. And we, down the bottom was, your fitness, your strength, all the stuff to do with your game day. In the middle was, preparing for the game, all those sort of stuff, maybe nutrition. Then right at the top was your well-being. So it was just a little bit. We surveyed the Storm guys probably about 5-6 years later, and it was the reverse. The bottom part, the key area for players was their mindset and their well-being. And obviously with social media and just the new generation, that well-being part was the key. The middle part was very similar, nutrition, and game day was just a little pinnacle at the top. So you can see in 5-10 years how that's flipped itself up, and how important that, athletes are not, it's not just that, you got to perform well. I mean, and well that, if things aren't going well at home, or, you got new ones on the way and you're not sleeping, and, you're not being supported off the field, you can fake it for a little while, but it eventually catches up, you and your performance. So, that part, getting to know your players, getting to know the dynamics. How do we make this person get the best out of them? That well-being space is massive in the game now. And yeah, look, they're addressing it. I know Ronnie's doing a great job in the NZRFU, and Ronnie Clark. They really addressed it, and you can see, the benefits, because, like you said, 27 is not, in terms of your lifespan, rugby span, that might be old, but there's a lot of living after footy.
Andrew, so you've mentioned you've worked with after your rugby career. We know you've played up in Northampton a little bit, but after your rugby career, you started working with the Melbourne Storm. Can you just tell us a little bit about what are you doing right now, currently? What keeps you busy, and what do you do?
Yeah, so we came to Melbourne to work with the Melbourne Storm. So I was about 8 years with the Melbourne Storm. And then I transitioned into what I'm doing now. So I suppose it's, all the learnings that I've learnt from my career and, working with athletes on staff, which is a really, enjoyed being on the other side. After being a professional, working on the coach's side and working with, Craig Bellamy and the staff in the Melbourne Storm to see how they develop and how can we support them. And so when I finished there, I started a business working with corporate teams that are really passionate about high performance in their company. They're passionate about their culture of their people, because I always knew that whether it's a footy team or a corporate team, you're working with people, and how do you deal with a team of a footy team, or how do you deal with a leadership team of 20? The same way, the approach is the same as you would with a footy team. So I sort of transferred that over to the business, working in culture and leadership. What legacy do you want to leave when you leave the company? And so, yeah, I suppose all the learnings that you take from playing, and also working at on staff, just transferred those over to corporate business. So take leadership teams away for workshops for two nights over. I always pick a nice resort somewhere, but you want to build the team and working at the Storm, but also with the All Blacks. A lot of those learnings are being very beneficial into the business world.
And I think that's the benefit of participating in, especially in team sport, because a team sport, you have to get along with different personalities. Like we've mentioned earlier, going on a tour for 6 weeks to South Africa, you have to deal with different personalities, people you might not like that much, or personalities that you might not get along with that much, but you need to find a way to work with them and to get the best out of the team. And I think you can transfer that to any part of life, because you're working, like you said, you're working with people. I think that is why sports to me is so important. It's so important for me that my kids do sports. They don't have to perform at the highest levels, but it's really important to expose them to sports, because sports expose them to how to deal with disappointment, and how to deal with people that they might not necessarily hang around with, but they have to deal with them because they're in the same team. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And we're the same. Having kids in sport, I think you don't. Sometimes you see a kid that has an amazing talent, but doesn't want to do the hard work.
Yeah.
So, and it's never been about, having the most talent. It's about working hard, because your character is going to keep you in the game. We always say that your character will keep you in the game. I mean, you get, obviously, talent can be that hindrance too, because you sort of disguise, or, you have talent and you don't do all the hard work. So I think that's what the great thing about any team is, that you want to harness the the strength that these kids have. They're obviously very talented, but how can we mold them into, with their own unique person, into flowing with the same direction. And I always see that, this player is a troubled player, or he doesn't listen, but how well do you know that player? And for me, it's how well do you know people? And that's the key for me, is let's not dampen down what their strengths are. Let's highlight that, but let's channel that in a team environment, because some of these players you can disregard quite easily, But I always say, have you got to know that player? What makes that? What can you unlock? Because when you find the key to unlock that person's, how he moves or how he operates, then that's the gold. Because then you don't just disregard that kid. That's for me something that I love about team, and working with corporates are very similar. Everyone's come from a different background, and how can we harness them to channel their skills into the business.
And I think for sports coaches or athletes out there, I think what we're saying is, if you want to know your players or you know your team, you really need to spend time with them. And I remember one of my mentors when I was growing up. He said to me, the most valuable thing you can give somebody is your time. And I didn't really think lots about it, but then as I grew older, that's the most valuable thing, because if you spend time with a person, you say, you're important to me, and you get to know them. As a coach, if you spend time with your players, or as an athlete, if you spend a bit of time with your teammates, you get to know them a bit better and you understand them better.
100%. Like, I'll give you an example quickly. Is that okay?
Yeah.
When I was at Northampton, Wayne Smith came across, and I remember I was terrified of getting up and speaking in front of the team. Like, not everyone can do that. There's some real gifted people that just can get up, and I was terrified of getting in front of the boys and speaking. But I remember Wayne, he asked me to head up the defense team at Northampton Saints. And I said, yeah, no worries, Smithy, as long as I don't have to get up in front of the boys and speak. And he goes, no, well, you get 3 or 4 other guys with you, and you can get those guys to speak, and for the opposition, whether it's a review or the next game coming up. And so halfway during that season, Smithy goes, oh, AB, I want you to present this game. And I said, Smithy, you said I didn't need to get up. And I said, but I'd been confident, after 6 months, whatever. I felt fairly confident, got up and started presenting. And from there on, it sort of just snowballed. And anyway, fast forward that year, the next year, Smithy goes, oh, I really want you to be co-captain for the team next year. But if Smithy had asked me to be a co-captain in the beginning of the year, I would have run and said, no way. But he's smart. He knew how to drip feed leadership for me. And then, so he really grew my confidence. And at the year, like I said, asked to be captain. So, when you know your people, when you know how they work, sometimes you can throw people in the deep end, and that's just not good. But he's a coach that really got to know me well. He knew my strengths. I love defense, and so I was passionate about it. And sort of the rest is history, really.
That's awesome, Andrew. If you've got a lot of experience in life after rugby, but also within elite sports. If you had to give some advice to young up-and-coming athletes who are either just breaking through or are coming through the school system or the college and university systems, what piece of advice would you give them that you would say is essential, what was essential to you to put you through to the All Blacks or to the pinnacle of sports?
Yeah, I think for me, I think really, knowing who you are, I think that self-awareness, because, when you're young, it's natural. You look to other people for, your heroes maybe. And sometimes, our heroes aren't that, their character aren't that good sometimes, So I think really having, I had some really amazing, when I came into the team, I had like Michael Jones, Ronnie Clark, who are respected, but also were really amazing, great character, and really good mentors. I think because you want to please, and as a youngster you want to give it your best, and you're trying to find yourself. When you transition from school to club or any professional, you might go from school to professional. You're wanting to impress. You want to fit in, and I think sometimes fitting in doesn't mean that you follow, and sometimes I always say there's the American eagle. Sometimes the amazing, you see them, they're gliding and they're alone, and sometimes it's okay to be alone in terms of sometimes you have to say no and stay on that path, or not follow what sometimes the people that you look up to. So having self-awareness, and because you are in that transition time, that teenage time where it is challenging, you're going through change and puberty, all those sort of things, but just know who you are and bring yourself. I think that's so important, that you try not to be someone else, because I know sometimes I fell down that trap of trying to be someone that I'm not, and it's hard work. It's not you, and if I say to teenage or young athletes going through, is bring you, because you're unique, and it is hard work trying to follow someone. And I know it sounds a bit quirky, but for me, is bring your strengths. What do you bring to the table? What do you bring? And if you're still in that development, yeah, don't get me wrong, ask those questions because you're on that development stage of your career. Have that real learning mindset. But yeah, it's a real hard, challenging time. Just being a teenager, but you've got pressure. You got to perform. The coach is saying you're not doing this, or you got to learn these, these plays. And you're going into a lot. So there's social media for kids now, which is even more challenging. In our day, we could walk away, go home, and wouldn't even make the back page. So whereas they're it's exposed to them a lot more, and they read a lot more, and so for me, in a nutshell, is bring yourself, know your strengths, and enjoy, have fun, because I think when you lose that enjoyment, like I said, when I used to play with my cousins, that was joy. Even though I was getting bowled over by the older cousins, it was fun. And I think as athletes, and I encourage the guys that I work and the girls that I work with to enjoy, and try and enjoy the journey. And I think in that professional world, you forget that the enjoyment. So they're probably just three little bits for me that I really found that I had to work on. But yeah, that's probably my three areas that I would encourage anyone that's going into professional.
Now, Andrew, I'm going to ask you a final question. This question I can probably answer for you because the way you live your life. But if you look back at your career and you look at what you've done, how do you want people, your teammates, supporters, how do you want to be remembered? What's the one or two things that you would say, if people think of Andrew Blowers, this is what I want them to remember?
Oh, that's a hard one. Yeah, I mean, look, I hope that people would always think that I was always loyal. One thing I love is to give everything. I think I always wanted to leave everything on the field or the training field. No matter where I went, I always wanted to, and this sounds a bit strange, but we'd go to hotels and the cleaners at the hotels, you'd always go, oh, thank you so much for tidying my room. I mean, probably quite messy, but I think just appreciating the people that that do things and they do them every single day, and as an athlete, you are very privileged. You live in a bubble at times, and just giving back to whether it's your community, your church, the people that your family or around you, and look, it's never been perfect, but I think just always trying to be able to give back to the less fortunate, and because we are privileged, being an athlete, that's a real honor and privilege, and that when you give back, you get more. When you go to a school or a hospital and you see what everyone else goes through, or you see your everyday worker that works in a hard tradie job that they're in the heart digging pits and concrete, that sort of stuff. It's an honor to have represented your country, and I think for me, I always wanted to be known that it was a real privilege, and that I got to live the sort of the dream as a 5-year-old, that grandma had spoken into my life, to actually live that out, and that's a real privilege, and just really respecting other people, and what they do too, is, for me. But yeah, sorry, I'm not really sure if I finished that well, but
No, it's all right. No, you did. You did. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us on the Journey of Champions. In my eyes, and I know in Matthew's eyes as well, you're a real champion to me. The way you live your life, the man you are, not just a rugby player, but the man you are. I know the dad you are for your kids and for your grandkids as well. So,
oh yeah,
if I think about you and what you've said today, your actions speak louder than words. Your actions actually shows what you've told us today, and that's what makes you a great champion in my eyes. So thank you so much for your time.
oh, it's such an honor and real privilege, Helgard and Matt. So yeah, really grateful to be on your show today.
Awesome, Andrew.
If you're looking to get discovered, looking for pathways in sport, set up your sports CV, a place to fundraise or manage the sport, please go to SportCirqls.com, sign in, or you can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store. If you like our content, please subscribe and follow us. SportCirqls, your journey, your story, your future.